How does he think he can get away with it? That's an even better question.
Yeah, really.
I'm back with Dan Vogel, the greatest living historian of early Mormon history, and I don't think I'm exaggerating there. At least that's my view on it. So, all right, I want to read this. I want to show the people chapter 4 of the Book of Commandments from 1833, which I didn't realize wasn't published until you just explained that. But it's now, you can see it online, what was printed, I guess what was salvaged from the destruction in Missouri. And so this raises an interesting question that we'll get to in a minute. All right, so it's chapter 4. I'm going to share my screen here. It says, a revelation given to Joseph Smith and Martin Harris.
Yes.
Yeah, it says in parentheses here. Right on the right here is their transcription. On the left is a photo of it. In Harmony, Pennsylvania, March 29th, when Martin desired of the Lord to know whether Joseph had in his possession the record of the Nephites. So tell us, what is the background here?
So Martin Harris had been fired from being scribe, right? In 1820.
After he lost 116 pages.
Right, in 1828. And he comes back. Well, there was a trial, actually. Somebody was trying to sue. His wife had something, Martin Harris's wife had something to do with this trial. And at this trial, somebody got in the witness stand and said, Joseph Smith told me there was nothing but sand in that box. There's nothing but sand. And, it's all a fraud.
So the plates don't exist, they're claiming on the stand.
And Martin Harris is hearing this. So he goes down to Harmony, Pennsylvania and says, I need to have a greater witness. This is Isaac Hale tells this part of the story. I need to have a greater witness. And Joseph Smith told him, well, I'll go out, I'll take the plates out into the woods and you follow my feet prints in the snow and you will eventually see the plates out there. And he does it and nothing happens. He doesn't see anything. He doesn't get his greater witness. But Joseph Smith dictates a revelation to probably Martin Harris is the scribe for this revelation, telling him, that he was, he wouldn't get a greater witness.
He would or he would not?
Basically until he had faith. But
so it's Martin's fault that he doesn't have enough faith.
Right. And so
okay.
But this is trying to tell Martin Harris, basically that you'll read it, that Joseph Smith is not to pretend to any other gift that he would grant him.
So that's the mind blowing part here I want to get to. All right, so let's read it. It says, and by the way, so just because I don't know, is this part the introduction?
Yeah.
Is that considered part of the revelation, or is no?
Even though it has a 1 next to it.
Right. Okay. So the italics is considered. Okay. So behold, I say unto you that my servant Martin has desired a witness from my hand, that my servant Joseph has got the things of which he has testified and borne record that he has received of me. So the first thing let's keep reading. And now behold, this shall you say unto him. So the voice here is God speaking to Joseph, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Meaning the way it's presented. I, the Lord, am God, and I have given these things unto my servant Joseph, and I have commanded him that he should stand as a witness of these things. Nevertheless, I have caused him that he should enter into a covenant with me, that he should not show them except I command him. Meaning, don't show them the plates?
Don't show anybody.
Okay. Unless I, God, command him to do so. And he has no power over them except I grant it unto him. And he has a gift to translate the book. And I have commanded him that he shall pretend to no other gift, for I will grant him no other gift. So, wow. Okay. So his job is to translate the plates, not to show the plates, not to, and here's an interesting thing.
So evidently he didn't get a commandment to show him to Martin Harris. That's why he didn't see him.
Let's assume for argument's sake, the plates are real. Because later on he has these mummies, right? And what they do with the mummies is they charge people to see them, right?
That's 1835 in Kirtland, Ohio.
And the mummies are real. He could have said, hey, I've got these gold plates. Pay me 2 shillings and you get to see the plates. These things that were written by ancient Israelites in America. But God is telling him no. He has no other gift other than to translate. He's not allowed to show the plates unless I give him authority to do so. Right?
Yeah. So his scope. He hasn't even started dictating the part that we have that remains of the Book of Mormon. He hasn't even started that. He won't start that until the next month after this.
Okay.
When Oliver Cowdery arrives.
Okay.
But right now, hasn't done anything, but his only goal is to translate the Book of Mormon.
Okay.
And nothing else, nothing about founding a church, nothing about anything. And that same revelation goes on to say that the book, through the book, God will cause a reformation to occur among the churches, among the believers.
So he might have thought originally that he's not going to start a new church, but that he'll change the existing churches to get them right or something.
Yes.
I don't know. Okay.
Through the book.
All right.
The book will solve, answer doctrines, resolve doctrinal disputes. It will solve all of those debates about whether you should baptize infants or not.
So doesn't that kind of go against what you're saying, that his aspiration was to found the theological empire? Meaning at some point that might have been the case.
That's later.
But so at this point he's not thinking of a theological empire.
No,
he wants to fix the Presbyterians and the Catholics and whoever.
Yeah, he hasn't worked out everything in advance. He knows the end and the beginning of the story. That it begins with Israelites coming to America, and it ends with the Indians destroying this supposed white Jewish race and burying their bodies in these mounds that exist in Joseph Smith's neighborhood. And so all over America, basically, too. And it's the mound builder myth that, we can just...
And you wrote a book about the mound builder myth, which is an incredible subject, but we probably won't get to it today.
So he knows the end and he knows the beginning. He doesn't even know Jesus is going to come and visit these people. Okay, there's several clues along the dictation when you go according to the order of dictation. He doesn't even know that Jesus is going to come and visit these Nephites, after the resurrection. That's not even seen. But he knows a lot about what he wants to do. He knows the historical structure of these people. He's just going to tell the story that these people that come from Israel are bringing true beliefs with them, which includes a version of Christianity, even though they're Jewish. But they live the law of Moses, but they look forward to Jesus coming, and they all know about what's going to happen. But with Jesus, because they're prophets. So it's going to be a story of a family that comes to America that has religious disputes, and finally the patriarch, the prophet patriarch, is trying to teach the truth, and some rebel against it. And this is, the story of what happens when some rebel against it.
And this is Lehi you're talking about?
Lehi and Nephi.
Okay. Well, so Nephi, essentially, we said, if I understand you correctly, in some respects represents Joseph Smith, in that he's the son of the patriarch. So
and Lehi represents his father.
Right. Wow.
Kind of the dual aspect of the father, actually. So,
what do you mean the dual aspect?
The good and the bad.
Okay.
Lehi is the good version of his father.
Okay. I want to go back to the Book of Commandments, 1833. So this again is Joseph Smith papers, and again this is a publication of the LDS Church. This isn't some critical organization, right? This is the LDS Church's publication, and it says here Revelation, March 1829, D&C 5. So D&C 5 means Doctrine and Covenants 5, meaning that's what it's called today.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go to D&C 5.
D&C 5 doesn't always, the numbers in the 1835 Doctrine. It is the current edition.
Okay, so in other words, although this is chapter 4, it's equivalent to D&C 5.
Yeah.
So now this is churchofjesuschrist.org, which I understand is the LDS Church, and it's D&C 5, and it's the same thing we just read, except it says, and you have a gift to translate the plates. Let's go back to the other one. that what it says? Let's see. Now behold, I've given you these things unto my servants. I guess it's not word for word.
No,
Um,
well, you should, yeah.
we're coming to the difference, right? But I want to see the parts that are similar, right? So it says, I have given you a gift to translate the plates, and this is the first gift that I bestowed upon you.
Yeah, the first
This
gift
is the first gift that I've bestowed upon
yeah.
you. And I've commanded that you should pretend to no other gift. Say, and that is verbatim, right?
Yes.
Let's find it here.
It's right there where right above the 3, right there.
Okay. That he, so here it's, oh, that's interesting. So here it's in third person and here it's in second person, right? That you should pretend to no other gift. And it says that he shall pretend to no other gift. Until my purpose is fulfilled in this, meaning translating the plates.
Yeah.
For I will grant unto you no other gift until it is finished. Right? So once it's finished, then I'm going to give you another gift, which is to establish the church maybe and do other things. But here it's for that he shall pretend to no other gift, for I will grant him no other gift. Full stop, as the British say, period in American English. And then it's other things. So what happened between 1833 and 1835 when we got until it is finished?
Well, as he dictated the Book of Mormon, it became more and more religious as time went on. It became more and more concerned with actual worship and church and authority and organization. And when Jesus comes, he sets up 12 apostles, and those 12 apostles administer the church and until there's an apostasy among the Nephites, and there's no more apostles left, and they go into this apostasy, and they actually dwindle in unbelief. And so they start war. They were united when Jesus came and had all things in common, and everything was a golden kind of era for 200 years. And then they started apostatizing and changing.
Just to be clear, when Jesus came to America, everything was this golden era for 200 years, according to the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah. And but they apostatized eventually, and the church became corrupted and lost authority, and lost the spirit, didn't have the gifts. No more gifts, no more speaking in tongues, no more healings, no more revelations, no more prophecy. And then they became ripe for destruction. And this is all a metaphor for what the Book of Mormon is trying to warn Jacksonian America to beware of. And they became ripe for destruction, and they split into tribes. Again, splintered into tribes. They were not united anymore. And then they started warring, and the righteous part becomes even more wicked than the wicked part, because they have sinned against the light, right?
Okay.
They have sinned against the light and become more wicked than even the Lamanites, who are only wrong because of the false traditions of their fathers.
Whereas the Nephites should know better.
Yeah. So God allows the Lamanites to destroy the Nephites in totally in a war of extermination, and that's how it basically ends. In Moroni, it becomes almost a lone survivor. Although only Nephites that survive are the ones that apostatize over to become Lamanites, and the truth is gone. And Moroni writes the last parts of it, and then buries the gold plates in the hill in New York near Joseph Smith's farm. And then later, 1,400 years later or whatever, appears to Joseph Smith in his room.
So this is incredible stuff, Dan. So, all right, I want to just finish up this issue of the Doctrines and Covenants. So going back to the Book of Commandments, 1833, and then the modern Doctrine and Covenants, maybe it was changed in 1835, whenever it was. Did Joseph Smith, when they published the Doctrine and Covenants, did he have those revelations in his hand and he said, "Oh, I want to change this. I want to add the words until it is finished"? Or is he trying to reconstruct in his memory after this catastrophe that happened in Missouri and the press is destroyed? Maybe he doesn't remember, or maybe he thinks nobody else knows, and he's adding until it is finished to say, "Hey, I'm not just a translator. I'm actually the founder of a church." How does that happen in the 2-year period? It's such a big difference. How does he get away? How does he think he can get away with it? That's an even better question.
Yeah, really. Well, there's several strains of story here, but the thing that changes the whole story of the restoration and the apostasy and restoration is when they're trying to, Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery they're trying to keep the Missouri church from apostatizing, because they're questioning a lot of Joseph Smith's revelations and his leadership, and they're not so sure about certain innovations like the high priesthood. They're not so sure about that. And him becoming the president of the high priesthood, we're not so sure about that. So they kind of saw it as themselves in Missouri. The Missouri church had its own presidency, and as a little autonomous to the Kirtland church over here. And then Joseph Smith started trying to control this one more. And they are charismatic themselves. And David Whitmer is the president, actually, of that Missouri church.
Oh.
Yeah, and the Bishop Partridge is over here questioning Joseph Smith. And there's a lot going on is over a period of years. And then finally, out of nowhere almost, Oliver Cowdery and Joseph Smith get together to write the history of the church and publish it in letters written to the Missouri church. And the first thing they announce is, by the way, we were ordained by John the Baptist shortly after, before our baptisms, while we were translating the Book of Mormon. We just never mentioned it.
Wow. So I'm not just a translator now. I Joseph Smith, but I'm only the translator until it is finished, and now I've got this other authority.
Directly from someone who has an indisputable authority.
And David Whitmer is thinking, I presume,
I never heard that before.
Well, number one, he's thinking, I never heard that. And he's also thinking, I saw the angel, I saw the plates. Why is Joseph Smith so special?
Before this, you mean?
Well, even at that point, he's probably thinking this, right?
No, this kind of it puts a whole different concept of authority in place.
But does David Whitmer accept that?
We're not just being commanded by revelation and obeying commandments.
Okay.
That's the authority. We now have a chain. We have established a chain that can't be broken. Right?
I see.
That means you can't splinter off over here in Missouri and be legitimate.
Right. So you're not defying Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery, you're defying John the Baptist.
Right. And there's a chain of authority from John the Baptist, the authority to baptize. He physically ordained us.
Wow.
Because he was resurrected, right?
Was he? I mean, that's part of the doctrine here, right?
Yeah, in the New Testament, he died before he was beheaded before Jesus, and so when Jesus was resurrected, all the bodies of the saints arose and went into.
Oh, okay. So that's the idea, is that he's been alive since the time of Jesus' resurrection.
Yeah. So he can ordain a human.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So
all right. Is that the claim about Moroni? Is that he was resurrected during the resurrection? Is that why they changed the name?
That's a whole nother story.
Right, because originally it didn't say Moroni was the one who appeared to him in the room.
It was Nephi.
Nephi.
It's always been Moroni. The earliest is Moroni.
Oh, it is. Okay.
In his official history, it was changed to Nephi. Some people claiming it was just a mistake. It was
Okay.
an,
And it could
an
be.
error. And I say, well, what if it wasn't? What if it was on purpose?
Okay.
What if he wanted Nephi to have a body? Because Nephi is like 600 years before Jesus, and it would make more sense. It wouldn't be necromancy, delving into familiar spirits.
Oh, because Nephi was resurrected when Jesus died,
Yeah.
but Moroni can't be resurrected because it's 400
Yeah.
years after Jesus. I see.
But the funny thing is that in 1838, he's dictating this official history, and he accidentally or on purpose says Nephi instead of Moroni.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, he's publishing answers to questions in the newspaper called the Elders Journal in 1838 in Missouri. Just right about in the same month, April, May, June, July of 1838.
Mm-hmm.
He answers a question about where are the plates? Where'd you get the plates? Where are the plates? He says, Moroni, who was resurrected,
Okay.
gave them to me and took them back. Well, so he said it must have been a special resurrection, in other words. So he's telling me that he's concerned about a body belonging to that angel.
I see.
It's not a spirit. It's not a familiar spirit.
Because like we said before, angels in Jewish and Christian culture had been this idea of a specially created being, and not somebody who used to live who now came back as an angel. So and that's interesting because
he's actually redefining the term angel. From what everybody else thinks an angel is. Right? He's redefining it to be mortals.
There's definitely in Jewish culture. I want to be careful about this, and I'm trying to think here. Are there stories in Jewish culture? There's all kinds of stories of rabbis having, appearances of angels. Are there stories of the spirit of a dead rabbi coming to a living rabbi? I want to say there are, but someone should verify that.
That would be
off the top of my head.
Spirit.
Well, you're saying from an Old Testament perspective. I'm talking about medieval Jewish superstition and medieval Jewish Kabbalistic belief. So off the top of my head, I want to be. We need to investigate that further. There's definitely the idea of a Dybbuk, which is the spirit, the disembodied spirit of a dead person. But that's usually an evil spirit of a sort. So that's I have to look more into that. So I want to go on to the next thing. We're going to take a break before we do that. Okay. I got to go to the bathroom again. Right. But last thing before that, if you still have energy to go on. Okay. So the last thing before we take that break. So I want to wrap up this issue of the Book of Commandments from 1833, Chapter 4, verses D and C 5.
Now, D&C 5 was published in September of 1835.
So it's 2 years later.
Highly edited. They were highly edited revelation. The early revelations, like the edits that you read, were done at that time.
And they were done at that time?
Yes. Joseph Smith did them. So along with introducing this angel ordination story, he actually worked in some of these early revelations, mentions of that visit.
Okay. So how did I go back to this question? Because I'm thinking as somebody in the 21st century who I have a web page open here and another web page open here, and I look at them side by side. Is he thinking no one's ever going to check? And I'm talking about where he adds the words, there's no other purpose until it is finished. No other gift until
at the time they published it in 1835, there was a review committee, Joe Smith being on it and Norbert Cowdery being on it. This review committee, the statement they made was that due to, the the only published versions of these early revelations they had was in the newspaper. In that the Morning Star published some of them, and people would be able to compare. Nobody else could compare because they were all in manuscript versions. And they blamed it on the typesetter and
Okay. So they had an explanation.
yeah,
Okay.
carelessness of the scribe. The scribes could make mistakes in hearing, and so they gave an excuse that wasn't really transparent.
So if you're a devout Mormon, you could hear everything we just said about how he added the words until it is finished and say, okay, Nehemia, don't lie to us. Don't deceive us. That's because of the typesetter. And you should have known that was Joseph Smith's explanation at the time. Okay. I mean, that would be the apologist answer, right?
That was the explanation at the time. Most Mormons that know about this, know that doesn't really cover it all, would say that Joseph Smith, under inspiration, updated the revelations.
Oh, okay.
That they are given line by line, precept on precept, sort of like when I was telling you that bishops were added later than the 1830 foundational articles and covenants, and that they had to come back and add it to that. They would just say he had authority by God to update it.
Just like he did with the Old Testament and New Testament, where he goes through and he corrects the. But in that context, isn't he claiming that he's restoring the original truth about it?
He did. He claimed that he in one sermon he gave in Nauvoo said, quoted one of his changes, like God doesn't repent. It repented God that he had created man. Right? Well, God doesn't repent. So he corrected that to it repented Noah that God had created man.
I see.
But at the same time, he delivered this sermon and gave one of his revisions, which was never published. He said that he believes the Bible as it fell from the lips of the authors.
Right.
And so by implication that he is restoring it to the way it fell from their lips as it was originally written. Nowadays, if you ask the more apologetic types, they try to say that, no, he didn't claim to be restoring the text to its original reading as if it had been lost, because you can prove that's not true. Some of his,
how can you prove it's not true?
Are just not, it won't work.
Wait, so how can you prove it's not true that he
the revisions that he gives are too extensive? And
well, maybe whole chapters were lost. I don't know, like the Book of Moses.
Yeah, but there's some parts that people that know Hebrew more, and
but we may not have the
work.
So well, there it raises the question. In other words, so if you wanted to be an apologist and maintain he's fixing restoring the original words that came off the prophet's lips, I guess you could say what has survived in the Masoretic text isn't what Moses wrote or Jeremiah wrote or Isaiah wrote. That it's not just the translation that's wrong of the King James Version, it's that there's entire sections, that's I assume what they would say, or that's what I would say if I was a devout Mormon.
Yes.
Right? Is that there are things that were corrupted that's what Muslims say, right? That there's things that were corrupted in the Jewish, in the case of Muslims, they'll say the Christian Bibles. Yeah. And Muhammad is essentially telling you what Allah really said. And the Jewish version is corrupt and the Christian version is corrupt. And Muhammad came to restore what was really revealed by Allah. That's what, like I said, what Muslims say. And I guess you could say that, like let's say that what they call the Book of Moses, or you have this whole sections about Enoch. Maybe those were in the original Torah written by Moses, 3,500 years ago, and the Jews lost it until Joseph Smith came along and restored it, right? I don't think that's what happened, but I guess you could make that argument.
The Book of Mormon claims that this great and abominable church of the devil has corrupted the text and taken out of the text the plain and precious parts.
Okay, there you go. So he restored them.
You would say that a textualist kind of would say that that more has been lost, or more, the Bible has been corrupted by glosses more than losses.
Okay. Well, but in any event, it's
additions. The Bible suffers from additions, like accidental things, marginal things being incorporated in the text, things like that. And the Dead Sea Scrolls more or less kind of shows that the Isaiah text has been pretty stable.
But then Jeremiah is not fundamentally different. There's big issues with Jeremiah, but that's different.
Well,
issue.
First and second and third, fourth Isaiah kind of thing. Those things come up as problems with the Book of Mormon, actually.
Right. Right, but that's on the level of textual.
So that's an addition, textual additions.
Right, that has to do with chronology. That's a separate. Let's not get into that. So last thing on this subject. There's this apology channel on TikTok that I follow. I find it fascinating, and he addresses this whole issue. And it's also on YouTube. He addressed, and this guy isn't like he's not like the.
I think I know who you're talking about.
He's not like the Joe. It's called Saints Unscripted, and he has a video.
It's a different.
So he's not. I wouldn't even say he's like really hardcore like the Joseph Smith Foundation. I think he's pretty liberal in his approach. So he has a video where he talks about why LDS have multiple temples. And he says, some people will say, hey, you guys can't have more than one temple. Deuteronomy 12 is one temple. And his explanation, the explanation he offers is, no, that was made up by Josiah during the Josianic Reformation, that Moses didn't write that. That's his explanation. That was added by, the priest in the temple, Hilkiah, or somebody in the court of Josiah or Josiah, whatever. He doesn't get to that. Right, the Deuteronomist, right? But he's essentially saying Deuteronomy 12 is just made up. That's not from God. We know it's from God.
Yes.
I'm paraphrasing what he said, and I might be getting it wrong. But what I understood he said is, what came from God is what we know from Joseph Smith and our prophets in the LDS Church. And what you see in Deuteronomy 12, that's somebody who wanted power and wanted to concentrate, which is what secular scholars say, right? Someone who wanted to concentrate the power of the Jerusalem temple. He proclaimed there's only allowed to be one temple.
There is that in the documentary hypothesis.
Absolutely, that's the explanation of the Deuteronomist.
There is a competition of where the holy mount is, which mount, which priesthood is going to win.
Right.
Yeah, I understand the guy's argument.
So then I wrote to him on the video. I said, well, I looked at the Joseph Smith papers. We have what, at least according to the Joseph Smith papers, is Joseph Smith's copy. And in Deuteronomy 14, he says, Joseph Smith says something to the effect of, in the note, everything up until Deuteronomy 14 is correct. So if Deuteronomy 12 was made up by Josiah or somebody in his court in the temple, wouldn't Joseph Smith have pointed that out to us? I don't know. It's just, so I don't understand how a modern apologist could ignore, if Joseph Smith is restoring the true scripture as it came from the mouth of the prophets, then why would you ignore that he says that Deuteronomy 12 is correct, right? I don't know. It's just,
I don't know. I don't know. The multiple temple thing is, Joe Smith has to solve that problem since he wants to build a New Jerusalem temple himself.
Okay.
And so the question is, by what authority are you going to run this temple? And by what authority did these Ephraimites or Manasseh, and Ephraim, it's supposed to be both of them there.
Okay.
But the tribe of Joseph is the wrong tribe for the priesthood to run the temple.
Right.
And he solved that by introducing the Melchizedek priesthood.
Wow.
Why? And Jews struggled with this question too. I mean, by what authority did Abraham offer sacrifice?
Right.
And the patriarchs, and usually it ends up going to Psalms 110.
Right. I'm impressed that you know that. That's very interesting. That is one of the Jewish explanations, is to say that that God took the priesthood from Melchizedek and handed it off to Abraham, and then eventually Abraham gives it to or gets to the hands of Aaron. Right. That's interesting.
So you're talking it gets to Moses, but it gets to that's an Aaronic priesthood temple for animal sacrifice and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about Melchizedek priesthood temples.
Right. Well, and then the other, well, I'm saying that on the Jewish side, the other explanation, which I think is probably the more common Jewish explanation, is to say that, well, the limitation of, it's really Leviticus 17, not just Deuteronomy 12, right? Both of those passages together limit where you're allowed to bring sacrifices. Well, before that was revealed, God hadn't, there is this idea of progressive revelation. And then Deuteronomy 12:32 says, don't add and don't subtract from anything I've commanded you today. So up until that time, God could bring in new revelations. Just from that point forward, you weren't allowed to change things. So there is an idea of progressive revelation. So Noah bringing a sacrifice, most Jews would say, isn't a problem, because at that time it hadn't been limited to the Aaronic priesthood.
Well, they had a temple, but they also had the tabernacle, and the tabernacle moved around.
For sure. Well, so there it gets complicated. The tabernacle wasn't. Anyway, that's beyond the scope of the discussion today. Right. And then there's the whole debate with the Samaritans where the true chosen place is. But again, that's a whole separate discussion. Right? Because they would say the chosen place is Mount Gerizim, not Jerusalem. And I, as a Jew, would say they're wrong. But, that's a different, that's beyond the scope of scholarship, I suppose, for here. All right. I want to continue. And you had brought up before the issue of the theory of how Joseph Smith could have written the Book of Mormon. Yeah. And there was an explanation at the time that nobody today believes, as far as I know. And I want to take a break and then come back and have you explain that.
You have been listening to Hebrew Voices with Nehemia Gordon. Thank you for supporting Nehemia's McCore Hebrew Foundation. Learn more at nehemiaswall.com.